All right. Looks like we are live and everything looks normal. You can't see it right now, but I've got a very happy boy cat loudly digesting his dinner just out of view. But when I start talking, he'll probably leave. He likes peace and quiet. He doesn't want to hear the sound of my voice. So, um, welcome to the first annual Million Movie Project Presents Halloween episode. I started these in January of last year, so I didn't, or I guess this year, so I didn't get the chance to do one. So this is the first one, hopefully of many, or at least of right now. All right, yeah, there he goes. He doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear my nonsense. Okay, so right before I hair going crazy like always. I got makeup in it. Love that. Love that for me. So right before I came on, I heard I was sitting here doing my pre-production stuff, and I heard my favorite song of all time come on in the bathroom, and I like just stopped everything and ran into the bathroom and listened to it on like my tinny little bathroom radio. I could play it anytime I want to, but that's not the point. That's not why. I had to go in there and listen to it in real time and drum the drum solo on my tum-tum. That's what I've got to do. It's a really rare song that never comes up. And we've got this super cool radio station in Central Indy. And it's an independent station, 92.3 WTTS, and I've listened to it for a million years. And they'll play anything from like Led Zeppelin. You can hear in the same hour you could hear like Led Zeppelin and John Prine. Like they just do what they want, and I love it. So I have it running all the time. So I take it as a good omen, because even they don't play it. Like it's like a 30-year-old song, but even they don't hardly ever play it. Like you never hear it. So good omens all around, I think. Couple of things at the top of the hour before we kind of dive into the more fun stuff. This is a channel that is not monetized. I don't get anything for doing this. I don't monetize because I really don't have that high of a viewership, so I really wouldn't gain anything from it. Maybe someday I might change my mind, but at this stage, I don't monetize. And I have been seeing, due to current events, a lot of people's accounts being demonetized recently and shut down for violations and videos getting blocked and such. And it puts me in a position that when I have something that I want to say, I can't say it. And I have to be very careful about what I say and how I say, so that doesn't happen to me, because they can't take monetization away from me, but they could take, my account away. And there is, my movie is here, and it's doing really great. And I really can't risk being someone who gets to say what they want. So I have to be very careful about that. In light of current world events. So, I mean, what I'm going to say is I will be very, very careful about how I word what comes next. In light of current events, global events, let's say, that we are all aware of. Man, this is going to be a challenge. I think that the first thing I would point out is that if you're getting your information from mainstream media, corporate media of any kind, cable news, the network news, the big newspapers, you're not getting the actual story of what's going on. And we are in real time witnessing something atrocious going on to Indigenous people, and their indigenous, perpetrated by colonizers, effectively. And we like to look at history, I think especially as Americans, we like to look at history by, these certain historical events that we weren't there for, by putting ourselves up on a pedestal and saying, well, if I was around in the time of slavery, I would have been an abolitionist. If I was around in the time of, the Native American land acquisition and genocide, I would have opposed it. If I was in the time of the Nazi Party, I wouldn't have joined. Okay? Well, if you're a person who likes to say that about yourself and you believe that about yourself, we're witnessing this in real time. Okay. And we do not have the luxury of looking away from it. And it is pretty much the worst thing that I can remember ever having been exposed to. But like I said, the corporate media or any mainstream media, even if you feel like you trust it, you cannot. What you have to see is what's really happening, filmed and broadcast from the people that it's happening to. Okay. And if you see that, you will never forget it. And it's deeply, deeply troubling, and it's pretty much the worst thing that I can remember ever actually seeing, and multitudes of it. And if you're confused by what I'm talking about, wake up time, right? We don't have the luxury of looking away from this just because it's in another country and another part of the world, because we are the ones, our American tax dollars are the ones that are funding this ethnic cleanse, which is, it's no short of an ethnic cleanse. And we are the ones that are seeing this through. We are the ones behind this. We are the man behind the curtain with this. So if you see yourself as someone who would have opposed history's atrocities, were you there? We're there right now. It's happening. And this is something that it's been going on for decades, obviously, but it's been very accelerated here lately, and there's really no telling where it's going to go. And I'm very pleased to see that, despite the media and the powers that be spinning the situation into something that it isn't, and playing the victims, that people aren't buying it. We're finally at a place, I think, that we're on a precipice of people really waking up to knowing that they're being lied to, and that that they're being propagandized. And it is time that we really step that into gear and realized that the tax dollars that we are forced to pay are going to perpetuating this atrocity and others just like it. So what's to be said about that is that that I think that what I'd like to make the headline of is, again, don't believe what you're hearing in mainstream media. See what it's happening to people in real time. You know, they have cell phones too. They're just because they're indigenous to another part of the world, they also have cell phones. They're filming it, and it's the worst stuff you've ever seen in your life. So, and I'm not saying send money, because there's nowhere to send money to. And what I'm saying is pay attention and get involved socially if you can. Just be aware of what's happening. And a few weeks back, I don't remember the exact number episode, or if it was this or Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, but it was before this broke in a big way. I gave a pretty in-depth meditation about the need to form a union that was just for people, beyond labor, and be something like, protecting people just by way of being people, right? That would give us bargaining power against the powers that be. Because if you're still stuck on Team Red and Team Blue, it's fruitless. It's purposeless. The entire system exists just to enrich themselves financially and try to satiate this thirst for power and control and dominance. And they are not doing the will of the people. And I think most people would agree with that, both domestically and abroad. This is not what we signed up for, and we feel like we don't have a choice, and we really don't unless we can work together. So I want to renew the conversation, and I'm going to push this topic often, of making something that I'm tentatively calling the People's Union. I'm sure that there could be a better term for that, but essentially it would work like a labor union, but it would offer people a sense of community and protections like a strong labor union would, and allow us to fight things on the local level. Say that you didn't want a historic thing torn down and a highway put through it, all the way up to what's going on now in the world. and it's like, you know, like healthcare and all kinds of things like that. So it would allow us to have bargaining power by saying if you don't meet our very basic demands to pull the money out of this conflict, to provide us with health care and social services that we deserve and we pay into and that can easily be afforded when you can send billions upon billions to proxy wars around the world to do your bidding, because not our bidding. And you know, we want this stuff to stop. And if it doesn't stop, then we go on a tax strike, or we go on a credit strike, or a mortgage strike, or a renter strike, etc., etc., etc. So I really don't think that there's ever been a better time to have this conversation that something needs to be done, because we are beholden to a system that I think the majority of us who aren't sycophantic about it on either team red, team blue, would say doesn't work and is broken and is self-serving to only a few people. So if you want to hear more about that, my discussion on that, then check out that episode. I filmed it around mid August, but I can't remember the exact episode of what it was. But check that out, and please keep your eyes open to what's going on. Don't bury your head in the sand. It's extremely important that we get on the right side of history of this. And what I can tell you is that the people who have massacred indigenous people have never been the ones on the right side of history. So make sure your priorities are in the right place now, and really, really educate yourself about what's going on. And no, you can't do anything about it. But like I said, maybe, you know, we could start. I'm not an organizer. I'm not a professional. I don't know these things. I've never been a part of a labor union. I just see the benefits of it if it was done in a widespread way. And I think that we could really benefit from that, to say, hey, no, we did not say that this is how we wanted our tax dollars spent. We don't want a part of this. We don't care if you make up some sort of story about, you know, there being a danger. We don't believe it. We want health care. We want, you know, we want things happening here. We want out of these wars and out of these conflicts, and we want aid sent in, and we want international legal consequences for the people perpetrating these things. So with that being said, I will leave that there for now, because like I said, I've got to be very careful about what I say and how I say it. I've got to be very controlled, because I definitely can't say what I want to say in the way that I want to say it. Maybe there's some other site that I could use to do that on. Plus, I don't really intend for these to be political episodes. But like I said, this is not something to be ignored. And I would hope that anyone who gets any value or entertainment or enjoyment out of the things I make, the things that I do, and the things that I talk about would feel the same way. So let's keep our eyes open. Let's turn our backs on corporate media and anything that the powers that be are telling you, because it's a lie, self-serving lie. And be on the right side of history with all this. So all of that being said, thanks for sitting with me through that. Hope you didn't have to hit the fast forward, because I did want to you know, have a good, fun Halloween episode. I just didn't want to ignore and act like I have some sort of privilege to not, with this in front of my face, to not say something about it, because I don't. None of us do. And I don't want to perpetuate that kind of message that we can just be like, oh, not my problem. It is our problem. It's everybody's problem. So that being said, oh my God, I did not realize how itchy this would be. I had this, it's an original, one of those original old ones, and I put it on instead of my pearls, and it is just, I don't know. It's driving me crazy. It's always something. At least we're not having the tech problems that I had last time. They updated the YouTube app so that they're trying to like be like baby TikTok. And it's exactly like lined up like TikTok now, but then it automatically defaults you to shooting vertically, and I don't like to shoot vertically for this. I like to kind of be like, here's my Pee-wee's Playhouse setup, and here's whatever. I don't really need you up in my nostrils, so I sit it back on my gooseneck, and I just kind of, you know, I chill. But you have to like manually change it now. So now that I know that, I did that this time, so it wasn't a big deal. But that being said, now my biggest problem is just that this necklace is driving me crazy. But a little piece of fun stuff. We're gonna switch to fun stuff. I swear. This time it's time for we did the serious stuff. We did the top of the episode stuff, and now we're gonna have some fun. I hope. So the I will talk about this more. I'm gonna have another episode of Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, the stuff that I do episodes coming up at the beginning of next month, and I think will be the second. But if you're, listening also because you like to hear what I talk about, but you're also a Buster fan, and you know that I've been promising you a soundtrack coming soon. That is also in the book, by the way. But I'm going to do social media about the whole thing. That is going to be released November the 8th, which is a Wednesday. I've got a ton of, they're scheduled. I don't know exactly how everything will work out, but I've got a ton of meetings and guest spots on podcasts coming up, which I will also share on social media. But my schedule is going to be really, really crazy for a little while. So up until probably the point of releasing and thereafter. So, once again, the book comes out, part 1 of Another New World, my Buster book, comes out November 25th, and the soundtrack will be out November 8th. So you'll get to play around with all of that and enjoy it before the book comes out. So there's that. And the soundtrack stands alone on itself too, like by itself. You won't know this until you've actually read the book, but the soundtrack actually tells the story of what happens in the book. So if you listen to it before, you're going to inadvertently hear the story, and then you can compare it after you've heard it. So there's that. So, okay, what do you say? We have some Halloween fun now that we can. Because, like I said, I didn't get the chance to do this last year because I started it much later than my other episodes, and I didn't really know how to go about it yet. But now that I've been doing this all for about a year, I think I probably have hit my stride here. So what we have here is I made a list. Some of my favorite movies. I like scary movies, right? I like scary stuff, like, thrilling scariness. I'm not a fan of just needless, gory grossness. I think that's stupid. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about horror gore, like horror grossness, shit that's just nasty and bad, like Saw movies and shit like that. Like, I'm not about it. I'm not. And I'm not about people who make that shit their entire personality. Like, please go to therapy, okay? Like, this cannot be healthy, right? So, to each their own, but, come on. Come on. Come on. That's why we need fucking universal health care right there. Some people need to be talking to professionals instead of putting it all in horror movies. So my movies that I like the most in the scary genre, and we know that horror is sort of a warped genre on its own. It's like every single thing that could possibly be considered slightly scary goes into it. So for me, if we're talking like in terms of subgenres, I like more twisty turny mystery style horror, scary stuff. I don't mind a little bit of grossness, but it should be cinematic. It should be part of what's going on. Just like, if you watch a gangster movie or something like that, you anticipate there's going to be some grossness, right? But I would hope that it would not be like the most realistic, gross, disgusting shit and traumatizing stuff. I don't like that. I want it to kind of look fake, I don't want to, let's do the cutting edge of awfulness. So, my choices of favorites, and I've got on this list some of my favorites and some of my not favorites and things that I've had some recent experiences with, and even some that have never been considered horror, but I think probably should, because if you really break them down and think about it, it's like, well, I've seen movies that are branded horror that have less than that in them, and are way less scary than that. So let's get on with it. I've got a limited amount of time, so we'll see how long this goes into. The last year, I guess it's been this last year, or maybe the last several months. I'm not exactly sure when they started doing it, but I'm a TCM fanatic. Like, I love TCM. I watch it, all day long, some days, all night long. When I leave here, I watched it all day today. When I leave here, I'll probably watch it all night. So a few months, they've been doing recently the 100th anniversary of celebrating the inception of Warner Brothers Studio. So they've been showing a lot of anniversary films and things like that. Doing a lot of significant programming to Warner Brothers. And a few months ago, I don't remember exactly when it was. I think it's like late summer. Let's say probably July-ish, late summer. I had it on like I always do, and they were running just some various celebratory films from 1973, and they I was home by myself. It was late at night, and they played The Exorcist, and I've seen it a million times. You know, I've seen it re-releases in theaters with scenes added back in and all kinds of stuff like that. But I figured like, well, okay, this is like pretty much exactly how this movie was intended to be seen, alone, late at night. You know, like so I was like, well, I'm not gonna try and find something else to watch. Like I don't care that I've seen it a million times. I'm just gonna let it go, even if I don't pay attention to it. I ended up paying pretty good attention to it, and the fact of it is that I was really surprised to find in this time through, because I really hadn't seen it in several years, maybe since like my 20s, I would guess. I mean, there I didn't no real reason to watch it, um, but I was really surprised to find that it actually is not very good, and I say that because it's actually not very good. I think what I really noticed this time is, yes, there are some very terrifying elements, about it. But if you watch it with a critical eye, you will find that the story is almost not there. There's almost no story, and the parts of the story that there are vague and disconnected, and the entire thing seems to revolve around um shock value, which is not an unusual thing to do, obviously. And we regard this movie, I think, as a whole, as like the scariest movie that ever was. And I can agree with that, because it really kind of broke the horror genre. The same way that the Lord of the Rings movies did for like all other movies. Every other movie from since the last 20 years has tried to live up to Lord of the Rings standards and failed miserably, I think. Especially the big budget stuff. I mean, not like, the little indie sitting in a room type of My Dinner with Andre type stuff, but I'm talking about like, the big budget fantasy. It kind of it inadvertently created the Marvel mess or in the superhero nonsense and all that. So the I think that The Exorcist really did that for horror movies, and just for scary movies and scary storytelling in general as well, many years before. Nothing really, I think, on a scary level, if you take it bit by bit, the crab walk down the stairs, and the head going backwards, and the help me, and the levitation stuff, it's kind of trite now because it's been so many years. But at the time, I feel like this maybe like was like, when you hear stories about people were fainting, they had to leave, except it was the Spinal Tap scene that really seemed to bother people the most, which is kind of odd, because almost everybody has been with someone or been the someone having something done. So I don't know why people fell out so bad about that. But it was very controversial. About how the actors and Linda Blair in particular were treated on set. It was very, bad for them. There was an actual murderer on film in the Spinal Tap scene. So it has its own lore. It sort of is its own a vacuum of a movie. But I was really disappointed to watch it critically this last time, which I wasn't intending really to be like, oh, I'm going to criticize this. No, of course not. I just was like, oh, well, this isn't as good as I remember, because I think your imagination kind of inflates these things too. But I was disappointed by the fact that, I don't want to say necessarily it's overrated. I think it's very important cinema. To kind of see where people were, and we still were. It was 1973, so I would still say that we were right in the shift of, the Vietnam War was winding down, and we were really in a place of where people were becoming less religious, like as on a whole. So that was still sort of in flux about like what people had in terms of religious beliefs. So that really, I think would fuck with people in that sense. But story-wise, and this could have happened in the editing, because I also read the book in high school, and the book was not scary at all. It was very matter of fact. It was I think based on that Roland Doe case. so it really didn't, you really didn't have any conveyance of any kind of scary stuff. It was almost like reading a police report. Fun fact though, it fell apart completely while I was reading it. I had to like pull it, like hold it together with a scrunchie. So I did read it, and I didn't really take anything scary away from it. So it's not that, this isn't just coming out of the disinformation pile or something like that. I am informed about it, but the movie itself, this time through, I was disappointed that the story, it was sort of like a lot of like, just strings that didn't really tie together, and I think if they had spent as much time on the shock value stuff as they had on the how did this happen, why did this happen, why to them, what is really going on, let's speculate, let the characters walk through this. But it goes from very quickly to she's hearing voices and they're scratching in the attic to, oh, that's just how she is. And all these house people that work there, like the butler and shit, are like, oh, I'm just gonna throw on my coat real quick and have her maybe not kill me. It's cool. She's strapped to the fucking bed. So it goes, it just really lacks a lot. And the Father Karras stuff, um, doesn't go far enough, and it's like, what is even the connection of this to that, you know what I mean? And it's supposed to give us some backstory about like, oh, he was the one to go into this, so he's the chosen one, and that's what puts him in there. But there's really nothing that ties these things together. So I found that all to be a disappointment, overall. And I think the only other, I don't think anything's in terms of scariness, things that you're not desensitized to because you've seen those scenes a million times. But in terms of scariness, I think in the last, since then, however many decades that's been, I think that the only other things that have ever really tied it for scary value were the Blair Witch Project, because again, it was so novel. In that last scene, man, that's beyond. And really tied the room together right there. And The Ring, which also, was a remake of a Japanese film of the same title. But the Japanese film was not nearly as scary, but they really amped it up with The Ring, and it was right at the beginning of the digital age. That's why it worked. We were at the end of all of that. And I actually saw it in the theater the first time, and when you see the girl in the closet after it's happened to her, I jumped so hard I pulled a muscle on my leg. So that movie, I think, is in that night, it didn't really bother me. I'm like, oh man, that was a pretty scary movie. I really enjoyed that viewer's experience, right? It was very scary. So I come home, and that night I go to bed, and I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, and as one does, and I can see across the hallway a TV is on, but it's on snow, and it never did that. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I swear to God, I had to turn to the wall and cover my head because I was sure that it was happening. Like something had happened, right? Like it was gonna happen to me now. No, forget about the 7 days. It was that night. So I think that was the only other movie that's ever really comparatively been scary and keep being scary. Like things keep happening, and it's unexpected things we haven't seen before. And I think that really plays into what makes things scary. You don't have to have stuff necessarily that you've never seen before, but a new take on it, we all live in the same world. Everything is pretty unsurprising to us at this point, right? But the thing of it, the Ring being at the end of the digital age is, the VHS playing, and the video stores were central to the story, and the tube television, right? And it was a tube television that night that was going off of a great big tube television. This was a lot of years ago. but it just, I love the ones that really make you think and stick with you over time. And I think that those are Blair Witch and that one are really only movies all this time that have really lived up to the scariness level of The Exorcist. But critically looking at The Exorcist, I really wish it could have been something where they put as much emphasis on the story and the why and the how. And even though it could be speculative, we didn't need real hard answers. To as much as they put into the effects and to the shock value to get people there. So it feels a little bit like cheating, like film cheating, I think, because it's just so much wrapped up in shock value. Another one that I've been more disappointed with, I think, in recent years than I was before is Poltergeist. Now, there is something I always tell people about Poltergeist. that I just love. And that is got nothing to do with the movie, and it's entirely to do with the set. When I was growing up, I'm an 80s baby, and when I was growing up, I always tell people, at 12:01 a.m., January 1, 1990, everybody didn't just throw out their shit, like things still looked like they did in the 80s when they redid their bathroom a couple years earlier. Like all that stuff, like, their furniture and their decor and all that stuff still looked like that. So as I was growing up in those years, I was very little in those years when I was growing up, I everything looked like that. Like that's the carpets, and that's the like the color of the carpets, and the weird bathroom lights that were like the what do you call them, like around the makeup mirror type of a thing, like and then weird tile and weird wallpapering and stuff like that, like in the wicker chairs and all kinds of stuff, and the way people dressed, it all still looked like that for many years, probably until the late 90s, when things really progressed and it was time for change to happen. And so there was a lot of stuff that still looked exactly like that. Everybody smoked, and everybody, you would still see people, really old people who didn't look like they were from the present. That was, you don't really get that anymore. And so when I watch that, it gives me this like this very nostalgic childhood feeling. This, forgetting about everything else that happens in the movie. And I also love the Easter eggs in it. You can see all the little Star Wars toys and things all over the kids' bedrooms and stuff like that. That's really great too. My favorite thing about it, other than the set, is actually Jimmy Carron, who plays a real Sleeves McCheese. He's the guy that's the developer, right, of the situation of the neighborhood and that. And I had the pleasure of getting to talk to him while I was making Oh Buster, Where Art Thou? And he was going to be in the film. He was more than happy to be in the film, but he had to call me up just before we left for California to tell me that, hey, I got a gig. And he was pretty old at that point. He was like, hey, I got a gig. I'm sorry, I won't be in town. And I was like, damn. So he didn't make it into the film, but we did have some good conversation leading up to that. And then he passed away a little while ago, but he was a neat dude. And if you're wondering why I talked to him, he was a close friend of Buster Keaton and Eleanor Keaton and through the rest of her life. So and that's again why the book got written, because there were things like and other people who I talked to who didn't make it onto film, and there are things on film that didn't make it into the actual documentary. So that kind of stuff, it happens. There was just more to tell. So for me, when I watch Poltergeist, and it's on all the time, so you see clips of it all the time, I get that homey feeling of being a little kid, and everything looking like that. And everything's so much bigger, like in scale and size when you're little. And that house is really kind of very tall, because they do that ceiling scene where, the portal going through. But I will say this, again, I think the story is very lacking, and I think that makes it disappointing. Like I gravitate towards the little pieces of what's going on rather than the story itself, because it's like, oh, this is only happening to this one family, and they try to talk to a neighbor, and the neighbor acts like they're insane. The house eventually just kind of goes into the void, and what is the void? I feel like they just don't explain things, or just kind of have you just go with it. This is supernatural, so just go with it. And I think that's a big mistake movies and media make a lot of the time, like, oh, it just is, it's supernatural, so that's all. No. Explain some stuff. Explain your logic. Explain your ideas about it. Like, why would bodies in a graveyard who are just bodies at this point be bothered? You know what I mean? Like, to come back to Earth to fuck with this one family. It just doesn't, things just don't really add up. And that, to me, I think is disappointing for all the stuff that I do like in the movie. I love the back and forth between Craig T. Nelson and Jimmy Carron. How he just can't stand him. Craig T. Nelson, that is. He can't stand him. And there's a scene where they go to look at the new part of the development they're making, and Jimmy Carron puts his hand on his shoulder and he puts his hand off. I love that. He's just like openly rude to him. And then the part in the end where they realize what's gone on, what's happened, and I will do this even still. And like if something happens in a movie or something, or in the news or something, and it's very, somebody did something egregiously, I like to yell out, you just you left the bodies, didn't you? You just moved the headstones, So it's I always like to throw that out there every now and again. So those were a couple of really classic ones that I really found in later viewing not to be what I remembered them to be, and not to be as great as I remembered them to be, and I found myself critically disappointed with them. But I mean, if you can get past all of that kind of stuff, I think they're great for new viewers of that kind of stuff. So just me, who's seen so many things at this point and have written things and have made things, like for me, it's just sort of like everything's hackneyed, and these are not as good as I remembered them to be. So on that note, what is as good and holds up? My number one favorite scary, I don't know if you'd really call it a horror film. I think it's classified as horror, but my number one favorite of all time is The Changeling, and not the Angelina Jolie deal from a few years ago. It is the George C. Scott deal from many years ago. It came out in 1980, and it is a really in-depth, really interesting story where you don't know where it's going. If you've never seen it before, and especially at that time, and I think subsequently, not a story that really ever got told too much. I think we would see that now more, kind of regurgitated a little bit now more, and more modern things going on. But it is my number one favorite scary movie of all time because, first of all, it's George C. Scott. He played some crazy roles, but he also played Patton. He's like the most serious, like, actor dude of the time. Like, you're not going to take this guy for a ride, right? Like, he's never going to play a dude where it's like, oh, I'm a scaredy pants or whatever. And you watch the movie, it opens straight away with this a huge tragedy where his family is killed. Spoiler alert. And he's a writer, and he moves to he's trying to find some sort of recovery in his life, and he moves to a house, a great big house, gets a good deal on it, of course, and famous old house in this place, so he could just do some writing, kind of get back to himself. And immediately things start getting weird in this house, and it is a haunted house story, but it's not a haunted house story at the same time. And what's so great about it is we don't have a scaredy cat who's running from thing to thing. He's determined to figure out what's going on. Like, he is freaked out. He's like, it's like when a cat like puffs up because it gets scared. Like, he's like that, but he's determined to figure out what's going on. And I love it. It's not exactly a slow burn, but it builds slowly. And it's like, and you're putting the clues together as things are going on, because if you don't know what's going on, you can't figure out what's going on. And I love those kind of movies. Those are my favorites. The one that keeps you guessing all the way to the end. And it has always been, even, way back to silent film, way back to vaudeville, way back to, it has always been a really big, easy target to mock seances and psychic abilities, and people who were, telekinetic or had mediumship abilities. It was always a very big, easy thing to mock, because a lot of people exploited it, were charlatans and fakes. It still are. So it was always very, very comedically exploitable, right? So it was normal for people not to know that those were serious things. And for some people with those abilities who are genuine and honest, they are, that's their life, and they take it seriously, right? So this movie, more so than probably many or most before it or after, is really the only movie that I've seen that really takes it seriously and shows it to you blow by blow. If you've never been involved in any kind of paranormal investigating or mediumship viewing and that kind of thing, which I have a lot, you will find that the people that do it take it seriously. They have their own methods. No two people do it the same way. And people that have nothing to gain aren't fake, right? Like, they want to share it, like help somebody, a grieving person, or see what's going on, or in a particular area, like a high concentration of energy, so on and so forth. So the idea of this character, this very staunch, what the hell going on character, having allowing people to come in and do a seance in this house to find out what's going on. And then the seance being depicted seriously and not as a joke, and shows how things are recorded, how things are viewed, how energy is added to the group. And automatic writing is shown for the psychic doing automatic writing when they figure out what's going on. So I love it for that reason as well, that it portrays psychic phenomena as really very realistic and what it's actually like. If you've never been a part of an experience like that before, that is exactly to the T what it's like in a lot of cases. And you see, you know, so either the person doing the automatic writing has this pencil in there all over this great big sheets of paper, and someone's feeding them paper, and it's not like they're like, which it's possible to do, you know, but the energy is flowing. They're showing that the energy is so negative and so high in this house about what happened that she's all over the place and she's writing like a child. So really, 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 really neat. I love that movie. Absolutely love that movie. And I think that people just don't really even know very much about it, or have ever even really heard of it. So check that one out. I hope if I didn't spoil everything about it. So I'm trying to name them before I, you know, so in case you're gonna be like, no, and stop this, stop the tape, and then go check it out and come back or whatever, something like that. So that's my favorite. Another one I really like was 1961, The Innocents. I know, the lisp, I know. The Innocents, being the people who are innocent, the ones who are innocent. That is an adaptation that is probably next to Shakespeare, one of the things that has been adapted so many times. It's a novella called The Turn of the Screw. And it has, there's ones called The Turning, or Turn, or The Innocents, or, you know what I mean? There has just been, every few years a new adaptation comes out, and a couple years ago another one did. Every few years some other version comes out, and it essentially is the story of like a governess, you know, in the time of governesses or au pairs, who has some shit going on in her life and is also trying to rebuild her own life, and then goes to some great big estate type situation to au pair for a couple of small children, and teach them, be their teacher and their guardian. And there's, you know, there's some house staff going on, but for the most part, the parents, there's no guardians around. They're completely ignored children. So you know what that leads to. So we have great big scary house with lots of twists and turns in it, and really, really fucked up kids, right? And I think this one, of all the adaptations, and they all basically stick to the same story, but that's the story. Of all the adaptations, this one I think is the most nuts, because of the little boy in the story. Like the idea is that she becomes possessed, or she becomes fixated on the idea that he is possessed by the spirit of her old lover. And it's I don't want to say it's psychosexual with a child. It's not exactly that what it is, because but what it is like the boy, the child, starts to talk like how he talked, and behave in an adult way that is really freaking her out, to the point where she can't ignore it, and it gets worse and worse over time, and everything just spirals completely out of control, and the kids aren't going insane, and she's going insane. And in this particular adaptation, they end up alone at the, you know, together in the house, everybody else gone, they just end up alone. And the performance this kid gives is one of those like really stunning child performances. Like, where the hell did they teach this kid to act this way? This is insane. Like, so it's very, very disturbing, and I like it for that reason. Deborah Carr is the star, and I can't think of his name, but he was in some stuff, and it's very, very disturbing in that way. Just this weird battle of wits between, you know, like a 6-year-old boy acting like a 30-year-old man somehow, with this already messed up woman. So it's super, super disturbing, and it's in black and white. It's very gothic in its way. I don't think it's really necessarily like intended to be like, this is going to be a gothic style movie. It just comes off that way quite a bit, because, you know, you have the English manor situation. So I love that one for that reason too. The Others came out in 2001, which I also saw in the theater. I saw the Dollar Theater, actually, and that one, that I think actually that was probably one of the last. Let me think here. I think that was one of, yeah, that, and then the Time Machine remake. I think those were the last movies I ever saw in the dollar theater. Um, and I would have been like sophomore in high school. And the shout out to the dollar theater though. Like you could see all the mainstream movies just like after they finished their run, and it was literally like $1.50 for ticket. You could spend all day there. You could eat there, and then you went out in the parking lot, get wide, you come back, and you watch movies all day long. Oh man, it was so cool. Like, and especially if you were a little kid, like you could just, or you were in, you had a friend in town or whatever. Just everybody go to the dollar theater. Just go to the dollar theater and stay there all day, and we'll see you at dinner. You know, that kind of a thing. Everybody loved the dollar theater. It was gross. It was nasty. You know there were mice in that shit. Had a little arcade. First theater that I ever knew of that sold actual food. Like you would literally, you sit there. In the last movie that I went to there, which was that remake of the Time Machine, I went with my buddies Isaiah and Justin, and Justin ordered a hot dog, and I was like, he's gonna sit here and eat a hot dog in this theater right now, and I was like, I mean, I know you do that now. At the time, I was like, whoa, this is some next level shit, right? So that's the last moment or memory I have of going to the dollar theater. Like one of those things where it's like you don't know it's the last time you're going to do something kind of a situation. So I don't know. Okay, anyways. Shout out to the dollar theater. If there's any of those still left in the world, I hope kids are still going there. So because you can go, you know, from any age, and it just is like the best thing that you could do. Anyways. The Others. I saw there, and I loved that movie, and that was sort of a looser adaptation that almost combines the Innocents and the Changeling together in a lot of ways, because we have another very accurate portrayal of a seance, and it does also keep you guessing all the way through it. And I really loved it. Really cool. Again, very gothic styling, where you don't know what's going on. It's a mother who acts, instead of the governess, it's a mother who acts weird with the children, two children, and she's going through shit. Her husband is in World War I, and it's so neat. I think I would say that's another one that I really enjoyed, but I don't know if it was directly intended to be a Turning of the Screw adaptation or not. Oh my god, this thing. Ugh. But it really kind of still was, whether it was intended to or not. It really still was. And then in that same vein, there's a film. I can't remember the exact release year. 2003, 2005 ish. Early odds. And it was a Spanish film, a film out of Spain, and it's called The Orphanage. And again, we have some of those very similar themes. But this one sort of took that genre of haunted house, scary children, and really kind of flipped it, and did stuff that it's like you've not seen done in this genre before. Very fast paced, very throwing a lot of stuff at you, so that you like are kind of like your mind is bubbling throughout the entire thing, because you really got to think about, you're kind of trying to connect clues, but you're getting scared over and over and over, and it's like, what's going on? With one of the, maybe I won't even say what happens in the end. It's maybe one of the best twist endings I've ever seen ever. um and it's really just fucking excellent. And because it's also, I think, maybe because it is a Spanish film, so you do with a lot of like, and it deals with children, an orphanage. It's a woman who is like a social worker, and her husband take this old house, and they want to renovate it to make like um a group home for like children in the foster system, and especially ones that have like illnesses and stuff that are pretty much never going to get chosen, that kind of thing. Not exactly a hospice, but just she has a child that she adopted who has AIDS, and so she takes care of him, and so she decides she wants to do it on a bigger scale. She goes off the rails immediately. And I think maybe what's super cool about it is that since it deals with children, and since it's another country's customs and lores and things like this, you get kind of some fairy tale action that we don't necessarily have here in the same way in America, or the Americas. So it's a little bit different. So you're with it, but it's like you're being shown something you haven't seen before, which of course is like a going theme with me. Like I love seeing stuff that I haven't seen before, or at least arranged in a way, or a version of things I haven't seen before. Because like I said, this is another basically a haunted house story, but it's rearranged and remixed in such a way that it feels fresh, it feels new, and like again has one of the best twist endings you could ever imagine. A couple of real bad gross out moments though. One time I was watching it, I think maybe the first time, and I actually almost fainted. There was so FYI on that, there's a really bad leg breaking scene, really graphic leg breaking scene, and a really graphic scene where somebody's hand gets smashed in a door. It's very very realistic in both cases, and it's oh my god, terribly disturbing. Like I seriously, like I was getting tunnel vision, like shit was my ears are ringing. We had to pause the movie. Really I think my blood sugar dropped. I ate a cupcake or something. I just remember falling out completely from it, but it's so good, and there's so many levels to it. I absolutely love it, and I would recommend it to anybody who's into the kind of the just not knowing where it's going, getting this new perspective on children's lore, fairy tale type stuff that you've not really been exposed to necessarily. And I don't have any problem with foreign films at all. It's just that I don't really have a lot of time to dedicate to watching them. I wish that I knew other languages so I could like go about my business and hear what's going on and still know what's going on. But I just love that movie, and I don't want to spoil a thing because I feel like a lot of people probably have never seen it or even heard of it. So definitely check that one out, The Orphanage. And I hope that never gets remade, at least in America or something like that, because it's so reliant on like Spanish fairy tale type stuff, and I think that really makes a huge difference. It's not just about how it ends; it's about certain games that they play, and like hide and seek type of games, or like take something leave something type of situations, and the way that she gets wrapped up into like what's happening, like am I being chased around by ghosts, is this what's going on here, what happened in this place, like what is this house, kind of situation. Plus the storyline with her own kid. So there's a lot of moving parts in that movie that I just love. Another one that they've been talking about for some reason remaking is Train to Busan, which is a Korean film. Excellent zombie film. Came out a few years ago, 2016-ish, I think. And there was talk about remaking it in America. The entire thing is on trains. Like, what are you going to make it on America's robust goddamn public transportation system? Give me a fucking break. No, it cannot possibly be here. And if they remade it here, it'd be like so stupid and wrong. Like, here's the imaginary train system that everybody's always wanted forever in America, starring The Rock and co-starring a 19-year-old girl that's his girlfriend. So it's like, no, get that shit out of here. Don't try to make Train to Busan. Just watch the original, okay? And that's kind of one that there's sort of like that, like it's a where there's a lot of melodrama. There's a lot of high action, but there's a lot of melodrama in it too. Very, very dramatic portrayals. There's a little girl in it who's very, very dramatic and stuff. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's also a really good message, I guess you would say, about how people view each other and view power, and that kind of thing, and what they do to each other. That it leads to falling out and that kind of thing, and who's responsible for what, and whose job is it to say that they're responsible for what. So that's a neat one. That's a real neat one. I didn't have that on my list, but it is, because I don't want to see that remade. Another, I think probably the second most famous horror movie of all time that I never really realized was a horror movie is Jaws. That is one of my favorite movies, but I had never watched it. It didn't occur to me until years later when somebody was like, "Oh, it's like the horror movie," and it's because I guess it just never really clicked in my mind that like sharks are scary that way or whatever. So I never thought about like the shark being the big bad, so it didn't really click with me. But I love watching it. I think it's exciting and exhilarating, and I really love I imitate Quint all the time. I did a painting of Quint And I love, my favorite thing about the whole thing is that's the U.S. Indianapolis, USS Indianapolis scene that he tells. It's like its own mini movie. Like if you just saw that, like it was like a one scene type of a play or something like that, it stands on its own like that. And like every time I watch it, I'm always like muttering like the words along to dialogue along to it. So for me, that was something I did not realize was a horror movie. And I mean, I see that it's scary. It just never clicked with me until people started saying, no, 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 this is a horror movie. And I guess it was just naturally known to everybody but me. One that I love that is because I think it's a really great portrayal, but also super artsy. It was Sleepy Hollow, 1999, Tim Burton movie. And I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, I love Tim Burton movies or anything like that, but I think this one was probably like, you know, one of his crowning gem films, just because the art is so great, the settings are perfect, the Dutch colonialism that is really spot on. It's something we don't see a lot setting wise. I mean, you do in a lot of older movies, 50s, 40s, but you don't see that in modern movies. And it really special cast in that movie. But you get a lot from it, and I love that they kind of stuck with the Washington Irving version of events, where Ichabod Crane is kind of thrust into this situation, but he's a scaredy-ween, like he's afraid of everything, right? So like he's got to figure all this out by being afraid of it. They had some really good scary backstory for him, or of trauma that he's gone through, and I love that, and everything looks fucking great. Everything looks really, really, really neat, and I love the way, the aesthetic of it. It's pretty much my most favorite aesthetic in any movie that I've ever seen. And I know that everybody must have seen it by this point, but and then the fact that they described that the Hessian, you know, who he was and how he was and why he was there, and that he was this most ferocious fighter, and it's fucking Christopher Walken, right? Like, yes, like that is the coolest thing that it could be right now. And I've made so many gifs for years back from that movie, like the scenes of him, and you know, his teeth chiseled, and oh man, so neat, so neat, so neat, so neat. I love that movie. I love everything about that movie. So, so cool. And I wish that like more movies strived to look like that, to be, you know, that kind of a situation. Another one I saw, this is something I would call a millennial classic. It's a little bit, people who are a little bit older than millennials, but this was kind of aimed at millennials when it came out. And I hadn't seen it in years. I've got a DVD copy, but who the hell has a DVD player anymore? I've had that for 100 years too, but this one, I just love it. I finally rewatched it last year around this time, and it was so kick ass. And I'm probably gonna try and find it and watch it again this year. The Faculty, 1998. Oh my God, what a cast! They do it up like the old movies used to do it, right? Like even the little parts are mainstream people. Like one of the smallest parts in the entire thing, it's played by Selma Hayek. You know, like they have mainstream people in all of the parts, and Piper Laurie is in it. She actually just passed away a couple days ago, but and made it into her 90s, so good for her. But the fact of it is that movie holds up. Like I did not think that it necessarily would. I figured it would be kind of dumb, because in 1998, I was middle school age. I can't remember exactly what year, but I would have been like 6th, 7th grade, something like, I think 7th grade, and that was like it was like when you're a kid in Power Rangers, how the guitar just like hits your brain and it's hitting all, like doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Like that was the same thing. And I remember at that time, like Josh Hartnett's character, Zeke, like everybody was losing their shit. Like boys started dressing like that. Like Josh Hartnett was all the like girls talked about for like years afterwards. Like he was the gold standard. I don't know why, looking back, but oh my God, like that character in the car that he drove, like the whole idea of him. And even though that like okay, this is like kind of hard to explain, because this is stuff that you get in hindsight as an adult watching a teenage movie, right? So not only did they have this tremendous cast, tremendous. A little questionable in a couple of places, but I'll let you figure that one out on your own. Some people I don't like to bring up their names just for the same reason. Like, I'm not gonna let that share. But some small parts, I guess I should say. But it was such a moment because we have this high school in Ohio completely crumbling, right? Over capacity. You have they don't have the resources that they need. It's like it was prime 90s realness. Like, that's what everything was everywhere you went. I don't know what things are like now, but my school was halfway between crumbling to the ground and prison. So you know, whatever the middle ground of that is. So and I think that really spoke to everywhere, everything. And it's, you know, set in the Nowheresville, Ohio, and that kind of thing. And just the idea that, like, all of it really dealt with teenage issues but unusual teenage issues at the same time as being a really great monster movie, an Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie. They played no qualms about the fact of what they were doing. It was basically like a modern Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? And plus Breakfast Club, where you get all these kids together who have nothing in common. They barely know each other. A lot of them are at odds. They're from all different socioeconomic and recreational groups, that kind of thing. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they have all been pigeonholed into roles that they are not comfortable with. And that ends up getting played out in the end, because if you watch up to the very end, you're like, whoa, because everything suddenly on the surface seems like this is a horrible ending, you know, it doesn't hold up. But no, but then if you realize, no, they wanted to be these different, they didn't want to be other people, they just wanted to be who they were. So when they changed, it seems like they've all suddenly changed personality. It goes in line with what they were, who they were saying that they wanted to be, what they wanted to be. And it wasn't until this last viewing last year where I realized, because I didn't know this, I didn't know who these people were at the time. It's directed by Robert Rodriguez, and it's the practical effects are done by Greg Nicotero of The Walking Dead fame. So I was like, oh my God, when I realized, because I did not realize that any of these people, like, I didn't know who they were, you know, when I was 13. So it was really, really great to be like, see how good it was that it held up. And if you are like me, which is like apparently nobody, a really huge super fan of the show Animal Kingdom, that wrapped up a year or so ago, TNT show, not the nature show. Sean Hatutsi was a main star of that show, and he's a main star in the movie. And there are definite shades of his character in the show, Andrew Cody, coming out with him as a teenager. And he was kind of that one guy for years and years. I saw all of his stuff without meaning to. And then it's only like in this Animal Kingdom era that I really like tuned into him. It's like, oh, I've seen you so many times in so many ways since the beginning of your career. And, you know, and Elijah Wood is in it right before going into Lord of the Rings. It is just absolutely stellar. And there's this moment that if you could take a time machine, you wanted to go talk to middle schoolers in 1998. For years later, like, every kid I ever talked to about this was like #1 topic of conversation. The coolest fucking thing that happened in that movie, and maybe any movie of that time period, maybe that whole fucking decade, because everybody had one of these, especially in old schools, was the guillotine paper cutter. The dangerous as fuck guillotine paper cutter. And they have this huge lead up at this moment where they're fighting, they're in a fight, you know, the group is in a fight, brought together, and they're in a fight with the monster, and they do this really excellent with great soundtrack lead up, really classical style, and then they slow mo it so the bolts are flying off, where it's Josh Hartnett, and he rips the goddamn guillotine machete off of the thing, and then he tosses it to Sean Hatazzi, and then it's the most fluid, cool fucking thing, and they lead up and they're like oh my god, so fucking cool. I will never get over that as long as I live. Takes me right back to being a kid, and it still is so cool. It was still so cool. That movie just absolutely holds up. Ending is a little bit weird, but just recall that everybody's doing what they're doing in this now because they couldn't be themselves before, so this is how that they decided they were going to find themselves. Another movie that I absolutely love, I know we're running a little long on time here, so I'm trying to move a little bit faster, is actually a comedy set at Halloween that I recommend to everyone because I absolutely love it. So politically incorrect at this time. Came out in 1981, called The Hollywood Knights. Probably my favorite comedy of all time, and I would describe it as like the meeting point between Animal House and American Graffiti, but as those two being the extreme, but this one having a whole lot of heart. You know, this is it's as inappropriate and sexist as Animal House is, and it's as car-centric as American Graffiti is, but it's not wooden or rigid like American Graffiti is. You get real feeling of real people, real characters. And one of the main themes going on through the film is one of the main characters is it's his last night in town with his car club and his group, and they hang out at this drive-in food place that's right next to the garage where they soup up their cars. And it is his last night before he's going to Vietnam. And that is like, and the music is right there, like it's perfect music. It sums everything up. The cars are neat as hell. And also at the same time, it's Halloween night, but the restaurant that they all hang out at that's next door to the auto shop is getting closed down. And it's like this hangout that everybody's used generationally. And it's not only just getting closed down, it's getting closed down, mowed down, and a mall put over the top. So that's where things are. And it's like, what do we even do? What even matters? Vietnam, you know, like there's so many things, like people are leaving for different reasons, and it's like it's all their last night. It's got a Goonies quality in that way, like the last Goonie weekend is basically what it is. And at the same time all this shit is happening, you find out the adults in town are just like the worst people alive, and they're having like meetings about how great it's going to be to have this shopping mall and take away this blight on their society or whatever. And but in the meantime, you're seeing the kids who are running amok through the city and the town and everything, and trying to like have their last big hurrah as everything goes. Very funny. It is very sexist, so don't forget about that, but it's not as bad as some things for sure. And it does also poke fun at the male characters in a sex way as well, which really never really happens. There is a really great scene that you will never see in any mainstream media, I think, ever, maybe even now hardly, where the main character, who's like the biggest practical joker and the coolest guy, and he's so neat, he's about to have a sex encounter in his car, premature ejaculates, and she figures it out. She's like, why aren't you coming back here? Why aren't you coming back here? She figures out, and she starts mocking and making fun of him. So it's like, you never see that. Not that, like, I know, like, that's bad too, but you don't see that. And then, like, that's, something at that time, in that place, in that ideal, of the men being superior to the women, you really don't see the men characters get knocked down a peg. But the best part of the whole thing is they spend the entire night being chased by a couple of Barney Fife cops who are just the biggest dummies in the world, and they just torment them through the whole movie. One horrible situation to the next, but that they're awful, and I just love that movie. And it has just this really great, like, sad ending, but like you're fine with it. Like, the story is complete. You don't feel like there's anything left to it. But like the very last scene, I mean, oh man, what a movie. We're almost through this. I'm gonna push through. I want to talk about these. Another one came out 2019, and this was more of a sci-fi movie, and I've talked about it before, and I'll probably do a whole show on it individually. But it was an Amazon original movie, and it's called The Vast of Night. And it is set in 1958, and oh man, is this movie perfect. This movie does some stuff that I have not seen done before or not done in this way. It's meant to be like, it sets it up to be like an episode of like a Twilight Zone type of a thing. And but when you get into it, and it's like an alien invasion on a small town. That's basically what's going on. But it's handled in a way you've never seen before from the inside. It is spooky, it is compelling, like you really can't, it's not very long, and you just like, you are so glued to what the situation is going on in there. And it does something that I've seen very little of in all of movies, which is the dialogue delivery is incredible. It's got this, one of the main characters is the local radio DJ, you know, and I'm talking small town, like here's the building, here's the building, here's the building, here's the school, that's the town, right? So but this DJ, like he has this really snappy, quick way of talking to people, and he's kind of pranking people a little bit. They're having a great big basketball game that night. The aesthetics are beautiful, and he's getting ready to go on the radio. So there's this very, very, very back and forth thing that it's almost like the Mid-Atlantic dialogue style. It's not something that you really hear, but then that changes from time to time when different scenarios, like his voice changes, their voices change, the way they're delivering the dialogue changes. There's this amazing tracking shot through the entire town when they really start to realize what's going on. They're trying to chase down answers. It gets scary as shit. The ending is like great and very emotional. Oh man, I cannot recommend that one enough. I absolutely love it. As far as I know, you can only see it on Amazon. You know, so do yourself a favor, see that one. Really, really excellent. Really, really, really well made. It's really on another level. And another is from that I want to talk about from I think 1987. It's called The Believers, starring Martin Sheen. And it may have been a little bit earlier, around 87-ish. Martin Sheen, Jimmy Smits, one of his first main roles. And the reason it worked at the time, and I think the reason it works now, is it's entirely based around xenophobia. Like, it's very, very about being afraid of what we don't understand. But it's also sort of one of these a serpent in the rainbow kind of things, except that the guy didn't go looking for it, right? Like, he gets sucked into this kind of these voodoo happenings, right? That are, it's basically just meant to like scare a wide audience about stuff that they don't understand about other cultures, right? That's the bottom line. But the fact of it is that this man gets sucked into all of this world, this other world of where like voodoo is like a very real thing, but a very dangerous thing, and they're using it to do things to people. People are using it maliciously against other people, and then he starts, you know, stuff puts him in danger and his child in danger. And it's got a real, you know, it again, Twilight Zone ending for sure, and a couple, it kind of hits you a couple of times, and it's fucking out for real. The the whole thing plays on the xenophobic thing, but then when it starts, you really start to figure out what's going on. You're like, oh, actually, it was less of that than it seemed all the way through. There really was a purpose to what we're talking about here. There really was a point of where we were going with the whole thing. And it really, it'll knock you over. It really holds up, and it has some very scary moments, some kind of like primally scary stuff of being afraid of things you don't understand, and then paranormal stuff kind of being used, weaponized against you. So of course it's at the very heart of it. There's a lot that it's like white people scared of black people kind of a situation. But then again, when you get to that ending and you're clarified on what has happened, but it's got a double ending. So that's what's best about that one. That's what I absolutely love about that one. So check that one out too. And then I got a couple I wrote down that I just want to mention real quick. It's kind of honorable mention type of things. These movies were not horror movies, or never considered horror movies whatsoever, but I think that they should be. I think we should be looking at them a little bit differently. And they both happen to be Elizabeth Taylor movies, and one is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and the other one is Suddenly Last Summer. And both are meant to be just dramas, different kind of dramas. But I think if you notice that about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, when I'd never seen it, but when I saw it for the first time, I was really shocked about it because it all seemed like an absolute horror movie. To me, the way that I read it, it was like a couple maybe who were killed on the road or something have entered purgatory. And that purgatory is to have to spend this maybe never ending evening with this demon couple who are just like the worst people. And I honestly can't think of anybody who could embody that better than Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, you know, because they really weren't acting. They were just like living life, and people were filming it. It was horrifying as far as I'm concerned. It's black and white. It's like been devoided of color. It's a mind fuck all the way around. They only leave the property like one time, and you only see like one other person briefly in that bar that they go to, like the whole time. Everything is just completely desolated. It's completely relegated to this one area, and it is it is a descent into hell. And I think it's never been looked at like that. It was also very, you know, successful stage play, and I think that's where it comes from before it was developed into a movie. But I think if you've never watched it in that context, rewatch it in that context, and you will be like, this is exactly the setup for a horror movie. This is exactly it. Like, this couple is this young, inexperienced couple comes into this, that they're just thinking they're coming over to meet new work colleagues, to, you know, they're just entering into their marriage. They're young, and they meet this very experienced couple who are demons, who are absolute demons. And they're not just like, we have a drinking problem, we're unpleasant people. They are actively trying to dismantle and upset these other, like, and ruin the lives of these other people for no reason, except their own amusement. They're making up lies about things. They're arguing about things. You don't know what the truth is. They don't know what the truth is. The other couple, very, very psychotic, very, very manipulative, mentally, like, it's like a mental horror situation, because it's obviously not gory or anything like that. But if you look at it in the context of, like, you know, a purgatory situation, it fits into that perfectly. And the same sort of was Suddenly Last Summer, which, again, another Elizabeth Taylor movie from earlier in her career, 57, I think, that one, 1957. I'm not exactly sure. Anyways, it's mostly her that makes it scary. Her, you know, and it mostly is what happens in the end, because it's talking about things that nobody talked about in that time, which was that this story is that this affluent mother and son. The mother was Katharine Hepburn. I mean, super, super wealthy. Which we kind of see this dynamic all the time now, but this was not something that was talked about, not something that was alluded to, and not something that the general public even knew was a thing. But he was a sexual predator, essentially, and he would use the mother. Before she got too old, they'd go off to far reaches of, like, different parts of the world and travel, like, all summer, and used her to lure in young men, and then he would also go around looking for boys to assault effectively. So but when she became too old, she had like a brief sickness, and she kind of lost her luster. He wanted to take his cousin that he didn't know very well, who was poor, and that was Elizabeth Taylor. So he took her with the assumption, and you never see him really except for in flashbacks, and it's sort of only kind of from the back, and he's very obscure character, and they just talk about him all the time. And the mother was obsessed with him, like they had the mother gay son thing, but like with added money that makes it all very weird. And the whole time, Katharine Hepburn had in the present has had Elizabeth Taylor's character committed to a hospital, and is trying to get her lobotomized. Is trying to get doctors to agree to lobotomize her, because she's going to tell what happened, why the son is dead now. Because the first summer he took her out, which was the previous summer, Suddenly Last Summer, and left a mom at home. She didn't know that was what was going to happen. Like, that she was meant to lure in young men for him to, you know, do whatever he was going to do to. It's told more an illusion than anything. It's not really directly told. But basically what we find out as the movie goes on is that he kind of played this card one too many times, and they ended up in this place that was this very kind of rustic, rural Mediterranean type of a place, and he had found there was a lot of very impoverished young boys in this place. And when he couldn't really count on Elizabeth Taylor's character to help lure in anybody, he just kind of ran amok through these young boys. And he was like paying them money and stuff like that, buying them things, except for the fact that they didn't really go for it. And then there was no amount of money he could pay them, and they were all just so disgusted and horrified by him that they basically literally tore him into pieces. They killed him and tore him into pieces, and that is her recollection. And as she comes out with this story right before the point, like the doctor says, all right, we're gonna just hear this whole thing out, and then if I think she's nuts, I'm gonna lobotomize her. Okay. And the doctor's Montgomery Cliff, and they finally get into a situation where she just unloads the whole story, and it is so insane and so traumatic, where she's describing how she was running after him, and you see a little bit of this flashbacks. She's running through these streets after him, and she literally witnesses him being like physically torn apart like a crowd of zombies would do. And even saying that they were the kids were like eating pieces of him, like, so you don't really know how far it really goes, but it's sort of this really just disturbing story. And then it ends with Katharine Hepburn just like snapping, like completely like going, she starts, whether she's doing it on purpose or not to like try to hide that she was part of anything, she starts referring to the doctor as her son, and just kind of wanders around looking like she's in a daze. And she gets up and down the floors from this weird little chair elevator, and she's just like, yes, we're going to go together again, once again, our summers together, I love you, goodbye. And she's just like ascending into the ceiling, and it's so fucking nuts. So I definitely think that those maybe should be reconsidered for horror. And also, so there was a good, in silent film, the last thing I'll say about all of this, in silent film there were a good number of horror stories that were dedicated horror stories, but there were some that I think if you change the music, they turn into something completely different. And that is where something that I like to do is kind of change the music up to like, mute the ragtime music and put on something intense if I'm going to watch it. And I used to do that with Buster movies a lot. And I happened to notice that in his movie Seven Chances, where there's a pretty significant scene where he's being chased by just this massive crowd of brides to marry him. If you put scary music on, that suddenly turns into a zombie movie. So maybe if you're not like super into and it's pretty intense, and maybe it's not like he's like laughing and smiling, like he's literally running for his life from these women. So maybe if you're trying to get into silent film, or you're not there yet, or you don't no nothing is beholding you to listen to that ragtime music, ragtime piano, and or orchestra music or anything. You can put on your own music, and you can make it anything you want to be. So if you're trying to get into it and you find that music kind of distracting or repelling, try that. Or just try it anyways with some of your favorites, or something you've heard about or whatever. And a lot of the good news is a lot of silent films are on YouTube. So just mute it and play your own soundtrack to it. And I've talked a lot longer than I really meant to, but it was going to be a full hour, so I wanted to get to everything, and I did. I was able to. I didn't have to shorten up the list. So I had a lot of fun talking about these movies, and I hope you'll check them out, and that I haven't spoiled any of them too badly for you. If you do check them out, sure, like, let me know on social media if you take my rec and you want to talk about it. I love that. I got more Buster stuff coming for you. I got my next show at the beginning of next month. I will have some more updates on what's going on. Again, the soundtrack comes out what was it, November 8th, Wednesday, November 8th. The book comes out November 25th, Saturday, November 25th. Yeah, right after Thanksgiving. Right in time for holiday times. It will be available digital, paperback, hardback. The digital is available for pre-order now. It really doesn't do anything if you pre-order it, because if you order it on the day, it's going to automatically go to your device anyway. But if you were going to do it anyway and you're excited, go to town. You'll be hearing from me on social. I'm on all the socials, basically. Facebook. I'm growing less and less comfortable with using Twitter all the time. So I don't know, I'm kind of pulling away from Twitter somewhat, but I'm on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok, you know, so like the normal things, I'm out there, you could find me. There is now an IMDb page for O Buster, Where Art Thou? So if you've seen it, go give it a rating. And that's where we are. And thank you so much for being with me and watching all of this and listening to everything that I had to say. Have a great Halloween season, the rest of the month, some spooky season. Eat way too much candy. Have a great time. Watch some scary movies. Hopefully some of the ones that I talked about here. And if you are in a place where drive-in theaters are still open, go check those out. That's a lot of fun where you can be kind of distant from people. Be careful, make good decisions, be safe, watch out for each other, and keep an eye on international affairs about what's going on, and start talking to each other about the People's Union. So I will see you again at the beginning of next month. Bye!